Hello, welcome back to Black Bear Forge. Quite some time ago, we made this very simple little fork out of a piece of 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch flat bar. That's roughly 6 mil by 20 mil flat bar. And at the time, I meant to go on almost immediately and make a spoon, which I never made, and a spatula. Today, I thought we would go ahead and make the spatula. If there's time, we might look at the spoon. I've actually roughed out the mass for the spoon based on what we did for the fork, but I have a piece of bar the same length that I started with on these that I haven't done anything with that I thought we would make the spatula out of, or the flipper, depending on what you want to call it. And again, this is 1/4 by 3/4, roughly 6 mil by 20 mil, and it is 9.5 inches long, or about 245 millimeters long. First thing we need to do is just isolate the part that will be the spatula from the part that will be the handle. So let's head over to the forge, get this hot, and get started. The first thing I want to do is just isolate enough mass that I think I can get the spatula out of. I'm not using a specific formula for this because I haven't made a spatula in a very long time. And I just want to keep that worked down a little bit. As I upset that with the fullering tool, it will create a cold shut along the edge if I don't work it flat. So I'll come back and I'll flatten it there, and then I'll do a little bit more fullering. And it cools off while I talk too much about it. But that's kind of what we're going for to start with. I'll go back to the fullering tool. I want this to be essentially a square section right there when I'm done. Something kind of like that. We may still work that down as we draw the handle out. Actually, the fork isn't quite square, so this is pretty close to what it starts off as. The next thing is just going to be to taper this back up this way. And I want to do most of the handle because the spatula end will be hard to hold on to and easy to damage if we try to work the handle. And this handle I can hold on to as we do the spatula. So that just involves drawing this out. I'm going to let this be a little thicker than 1/4 inch right there, but by the time we get up into here, we're going to thin it out closer to 1/8. So there's no reason to let this section in the middle get overly thick. You could draw this out over the horn if you want. I like leaving it a little smoother and straighter by doing it over the face of the anvil, but it's just whatever you prefer. This looks like a good time to go ahead and flip this around and finish the end of the handle. Just smooth things up a little bit there first. I'm going to blend that taper in a little bit and start thinning this section. Keep the taper going smooth. I'm also going to go ahead and put my offset for my ring handle here because it doesn't need to be thinned out so much. That's just half face blows at the edge of the anvil. You're going to want this to be about a 1/4 inch square and then taper it out to a long, skinny, round taper. I think I will go over to the horn of the anvil to draw that out a little bit quicker. This will make this a lot quicker. Then we'll come back to the face to clean that up. Get it all cleaned up and nice as a square taper. And then we'll go to octagon. And we'll start rounding it up, and then we'll finish rounding in the next heat. I want to go ahead and spread this out. Notice this one is definitely wider and much thinner by the time it gets to that part of the handle. I'm just going to use the cross peen. And I don't want to thin right here where my little ring handle is going to come off, so I avoid that. That should be a lot closer. It's all about the same length, perhaps just a little bit wider right through there. So we're just going to spread that out just a little bit more. And that's looking very close. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and form my ring here and try and clean up that little divot that I ended up with unintentionally. Spread that out a little bit right in there just to clean that up some. That will look much better. Now we can do the ring. First we'll put a happy little curl on the end of this. Some of you got that joke. And I'm going to offset that just a little bit right there to get it started to back bend. I won't need to back bend it much. You'll notice this one doesn't have much of a back bend in it. This ring is going to end up bigger than the one on the fork. See, I should write this stuff down and then it'll all come out the same every time. But that's okay. I don't mind if things like this have their own little unique features on them. Just one last heat to kind of clean this up a little bit. It's just a little bulged out there. And then we'll turn it around and do the spatula. This really is just straightening up and cleaning up here. No real reshaping of anything. That's really all I'm going to do to that for now. Let's turn it around and see if I left enough material here to make a spatula. The first thing I want to do is create a little setup here by thinning the top of this and then coming forward about a third and thinning a little bit right here. And I hope this makes sense. And I hope you can kind of see that. So what I've done is create a thin spot here and here, so it's kind of fat right here in the middle and tapers this way. So when I spread this with the cross peen, I'm hoping that this middle section spreads wide and creates kind of an oval right here, and then that this spreads wider at the end than it does right next to that oval, and that creates a very classic spatula end. I'm going to refine that a little bit. It can be a lot thinner in both of those areas. So that's better. That's much more what I want, and we'll see if that works out as I intended it to. We are just going to start spreading with the cross peen in the middle of this. It's going to need to be pretty thin. We're taking it down about 1/4. So it starts off as a 1/4 inch. We want it down to at least a 1/16 of an inch thin, fairly thin. You can kind of see the shape I was trying to establish starting to happen. It's still about 1/3 or half thicker than I want it to be, so we'll keep spreading. Cools off real fast. Even though the anvil's not cold anymore, It's just such thin material, so keep getting it hot. This is going to need some filing or other trimming. Now that it's almost thin enough, time to go to the face and smooth it out. You notice this is the working side of the spatula down against the anvil. That way it's going to be smoother and the back will have the crosspeen marks if there's any left. I want to get rid of most of them, but sometimes you don't quite. I'm just making sure there's a nice transition to the handle. This is really going to be a small spatula. And it's still going to need some filing or grinding to clean it up. But it'll be a completely functional spatula. I think the next thing we'll do is take a flatter to it just to be sure. This is the kind of thing I tend to do over at the treadle hammer instead of at the anvil most of the time. It's a little bit faster that way. This helps straighten it, and you can get into this little shoulder a little bit cleaner. Also a little bit low for my holdfast to hold on to there. So that's about all we're going to do with that. That'll all be cleaned up cold. I'm going to put a couple little chisel marks in here though to match this one. Let's try a little bit shorter holdfast. Oh, much better. And that's right about here. Don't cut all the way through. In fact, you don't want to cut even, well, not even a fourth of the way through, just enough to leave a nice line. You just want to give this the shape that you want your spatula to have. And that is just up to what you like. I like this kind of recurve shape here. Very similar to what I do with the fork. And I'm going to continue to curve that all the way up the handle. So we'll turn it around. Let's wire brush it real quick first. Wire brushing is just to get rid of the forge scale and leave a better finish. Working it clear down into a black heat helps accomplish the same thing. Now we'll come over to the treadle hammer and put my touch mark on the back of the handle. And then we'll just put a final gentle curve up in here. And again, I'm trying to match the general curve that the fork has. It's kind of my prototype here. Doesn't have to be perfect though. They're unique items. If they aren't quite perfectly matched, I think that's okay. Just depends on what you want to go for. So the only thing that's left is to clean this shape up a little bit. I want to round these up so they match. I really like the way that side came out, but unfortunately this one did not. So I'm going to have to bring this in a little bit and just work on that and try and clean it up a little bit. Well, here's our little spatula, and it really is a little spatula, but it isn't an unusable spatula. This is actually ideal for a little hand-forged skillet I've got. It's only about a 6-inch skillet. We use it to heat up tortillas and things like that, and this will be ideal for that process. Perhaps not big enough to flip burgers on the barbecue, but you can upsize the process if you want to. And starting with a piece of 1-inch wide bar and maybe a little bit longer section to draw out into the spatula would all make a difference with this. This ended up being about 2 3/4 inches long, which is about 70 millimeters. And it ended up being just under 2 inches wide at the very tip, which ends up being just a little bit less than 50 millimeters. And that's not a bad size. It's not as big as I might have liked it. But again, if you start with a piece of material that is wider, you can get a much wider spatula. And you can adjust accordingly. You can always draw the handle out exactly the same. If you're starting with a piece of 1 1/4 inch wide material to get this spatula end out of it, you're going to end up using a lot less lengthwise because you've got so much more width and there's going to be more drawing out. But that's all stuff you can adapt to. Do test pieces, do practice pieces. If this isn't the spatula you thought you wanted to make, start over again, make another one. This is still a useful tool, and it's going to probably hang in my kitchen next to this fork. Or perhaps they'll both end up on the Etsy shop after I get the matching spoon done, but we'll do that for another video. Now I said I wanted to make this about a 1/16 of an inch thick, or 16 gauge thick, and just measuring with a ruler, I'm pretty much right there. If I used a micrometer or a caliper, I'd get a more accurate measurement, but for my purposes, this is pretty close, and it really is pretty much a 1/16 of an inch thick. I do hope you enjoyed that project. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button down below. Ring that bell next to the subscribe button. That way you'll get notifications when we make new videos. But in the meantime, feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends or on social media, but then make time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.